Andy is a car freak. Fuel runs through his veins. He makes his living test driving cars and writes about them for a magazine. But he never dreamt he was going to test one of these in Israel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is this your beautiful lady?
Yes, this is mine.
Okay, let's try it.
It was one of my childhood dreams to drive one of this. Put the first. Oh, no server, of course, but it's expectable. It's a huge car.
So this is the Volga. In Soviet times, they called it the Russian Mercedes. If you weren't a taxi driver, you needed to be somebody to drive it.
The sound it makes, it actually brings me memory from childhood, because every single taxi in Soviet Union was Volga. And even the sound of the turn.
The Volga was first produced in the 50s, and over the next 16 years, more than 1.5 million were made in the Soviet Union. Some were exported to the West, especially to France and Belgium. But for Israel, which at that time did not have ties with the Soviet Union, the car was something mysterious.
This car was brought here in the 90s, during the days of mass immigration from Soviet Union to Israel. Somebody brought this car over, drove it a little, and then put it in the junkyard. I saw it, and I decided I was going to take it, rebuild it, and drive it.
Before Pavel Bondarchik immigrated to Israel, he was a taxi driver in Moscow. 16 years of his life was spent behind the wheel of a Volga. After coming to Israel, he couldn't hold the wheel of a Japanese car, which is why today he is driving the only Volga Gaz 24 on the roads in Israel. The second one is also his.
I keep this one only for repairs.
After some time, he understood he was not alone and met up with friends. They've also immigrated, at least physically, with their families to Israel, but can't live without the real loves they left behind.
This is the first model that Motor Factory Vaz produced. It was produced for export and landed up in Bulgaria. When the owner of this car decided to immigrate to Israel, he brought this car with him. He drove her a little bit, but preferred a Western car. I bought it from him, and for 7 years now have been driving my Lada.
She was brought in 1973 to Israel by some immigrants from Georgia. After they drove her a little bit, they just left her abandoned in some farm. When I saw her, I knew I wanted to have her. It took 2.5 years to rebuild and have a look the way she does today. My car took first place in Israel in the competition of car collectors.
Once a week, Pavel and his comrades come to the Russian restaurant in Ashdod to have a beer and talk about their passion. The reactions of people are always full of nostalgia.
I never expected to see this car in Israel. I'm from the city where the factory is.
I worked for 16 years in Russia in this car as a taxi driver.
But for native Israelis, it's difficult to understand the fuss.
What can I say? It looks like a sweet car. I don't want one like this.
But after they opened the engine, I decided to make up my own mind about Volga.
It's nice. It's not very comfortable, but maybe you have to come from the Soviet Union to appreciate these kind of cars.
Today, after 15 years in Israel, the guys feel Israel is their home. But when the heat of the Middle East gets too heavy, Pavel sits in the Volga, turns up the volume, listens to Vysotsky, and remembers bygone years, when things were maybe not so comfortable, but definitely colder, more naive and simple. RT, Ashdod.